What's up YouTube? Today we're going to be talking about doing intervals on the rowing machine. Why? Because without a television screen in front of you, the rowing machine can be extremely boring. And honestly, intervals are a great way of jazzing up and turning you into a superhuman beast. Before doing any intervals, you gotta warm up. Here I'm just setting an easy damper setting, number 7, and I'm just going to row for 2 to 3 minutes, just get all the tightness out of my joints, get my limbs warm, get my muscles warm, just get ready to start giving it my all. I highly recommend don't just sit down, set the damper to 10 and just start heaving hard on it. It's kind of like getting under the squat rack and just lowering up to max and starting to go. It's not a good idea. You really got to warm up, make sure you're limber. For me, I did squats on Monday. This is Wednesday. I am tight as hell, so I'm going to spend a little extra time just really getting my mobility back, my movement back, and then I'm going to start getting into the intervals. While I'm warming up here, I'm just going to explain a couple things about intervals on the rowing machine. For some reason, some people kind of think it's intimidating, it's kind of complicated, they're really not sure what they should be doing. They've heard of things called Tabatas, they think, should I be doing Tabatas on the rower? Then they're not sure, should I be going for distance, should I be going for time, how far should I be going, how long should I be going, should I be playing with the damper setting during each interval, should I be concerned about my cadence, how do I do it? There are all kinds of factors involved in doing intervals on the rower, and it can be pretty intimidating. So this video is all about breaking it down, simplifying it, giving you some things to consider when you're planning your intervals, and just some things overall to be cognizant of. I'm just going to be talking over top of my interval training here, giving you all kinds of tips, ideas, a little bit of knowledge. Just so you know, I was doing intervals for distance today. I was doing them for 200 meters hard at damper setting 10, then I was dialing it back to 7 for 600 meters, and I did 4 sets of that. And usually my cadence got up to 39 strokes a minute on my work set, and I wasn't concerned about where my cadence ended up on my rest set. I was just doing some easy recovery. There aren't any hard and fast rules involved in interval training on the rower. However, there are some principles that should be kept in mind. First, work sets should be hard, and second, rest sets should be long. So how hard is hard enough? Hard enough is basically defined by your breathing, your tightness in your muscles, and anything resembling the pump. By the end of your work set, you should be breathing very hard. You should almost be gasping for air. If you can carry on a conversation, you didn't go hard enough. Basically, this is anaerobic activity. Anaerobic means living in the absence of air, as opposed to aerobic, which means living in the presence of air. So if you are breathing really, really hard, you're in that anaerobic zone, and that means you're going hard enough on your intervals. The muscles in your legs should be doing a lot of the work, and they should be getting very tight by the end of the work set. You should feel like you're fighting for each stroke. It shouldn't last long, it should only last a couple of seconds at the end of the set. Really, once you start getting that feeling, you just want to push yourself a little bit more. The longer you go with that feeling of tightness, and the tighter it gets, the more sore you're going to be the next day. What's happening is, as you're working on your work set, your body's producing lactate, and that lactate needs to be cleared in your rest set, which brings us to the rest set. How long should your rest set be? Generally speaking, your rest period should be about 3 times as long as your work period in time, not necessarily distance, but sometimes distance can be a good measure. So generally, if you're going to do a work set for, say, 1 minute, you're going to want to rest for 3 minutes. The reason it's 3 times as long as a general guideline is just so that your body can clear that lactate before your next work set. Let's talk about some of the variables that go into the rowing machine. There's distance, there's time, there's cadence, and there's your damper setting. We're going to look at each one individually, and then I'm going to explain how you can tune each one to make the most out of your intervals. Distance is arguably the most fun variable to play with, just because you can race against yourself, or you can just go hard. You can even check how far you went over the course of your interval training session and see how that's stacked up against a previous interval training session. I like to set the distance anywhere between 100 meters and 500 meters for the work set, and then about how long that took me to complete is how long I'm going to rest for, 3 times that. Sometimes I also set the rest for a distance, usually 3 times the work set, just so that it's easier for me to figure out how long to recover for if I wasn't paying too much attention to the clock. But generally speaking, if I'm going to go for, say, 100 meters to 500 meters for the work set, then my rest set is going to end up becoming anywhere between 30 seconds to 3 minutes roughly. But that's just because I know how long it takes me to complete the distance work sets. So time is another one that I like to set for the work set. So I like it anywhere between 30 seconds to 2 minutes. And then I set the rest set 3 times as long as that. So anywhere between 1 minute 30 seconds to 6 minutes respectively. I wouldn't go any higher than 4 minutes for your work set, because then you're getting into aerobic training as opposed to anaerobic training. That's endurance training as opposed to interval training. So you're going to want anything lower than 4 minutes, but for me, I like 30 seconds to 2 minutes to really keep the intensity high. Generally, you can choose either strokes per minute or calories per hour for your cadence. But if you're using a Concept 2 rower, there are plenty of meters available to pick from. I usually like to use just strokes per minute for my cadence because it's a very simple measurement to look at. It's just one variable and it tells you a lot about how hard you're rowing. The damper is where a lot of people get confused. A lot of people just throw it right up to 10 and think they're getting the most out of the rowing machine. But that's actually somewhat incorrect. If you actually pick a damper setting a little bit lower but still challenging, somewhere around 7, you can end up rowing faster in your work sets, and subsequently it might actually be a harder workout during the work session. Sometimes it might be more appropriate to turn it up to 10 on your work set if you want to row hard instead of rowing fast. Sometimes you can actually turn the damper up on your rest sets to slow you down so that way you're breathing because there's more resistance. But then you might end up fighting more on the rest set. You really just have to get used to playing with the damper setting and figuring out what works for you. Sometimes you might even just leave the damper the same, leave it consistent through both the work set and the rest set, and just use the cadence as a measure. Between cadence and damper, play around, figure out what works for you, use the cadence and the damper just to change the intensity of your intervals, and use time and distance as the variables that you use to determine your work set and your rest set. So some examples of interval training that you can do just on your own, some workouts are just work for 300 meters, rest for 900 meters, do 4 sets. Another one would be 500 meters of power. Work for 500 meters, rest for 1500 meters. That's a 2,000 meter shot. That's an Olympic race. Do 4 of those. That's 8 kilometers in total. That's a lot of rowing. Another one would just be 30 seconds of power. Just 30 seconds on, 1 minute 30 off. See how hard you can go on the 30 seconds, and just take the minute 30 just to do whatever you need to do in order to hit it again on the 30 seconds. One final note, some people get confused. They don't know whether or not they should be rowing on their rest set or sitting there, or what they should be doing, checking their phone. Honestly, it really doesn't matter so much as you're recovering. Sometimes I like to row to go into active recovery. It helps clear that lactate faster. Other times I'm just so gassed by the end of the work set, I just need to sit there and breathe. Just figure out what works for you and make those intervals work. The bottom line is, if you're going to do intervals on the rowing machine, make sure your work sets are hard, make sure your rest sets are for recovery. Use distance and time to measure your work sets. Generally pick time for your rest sets, and then use your cadence and your damper setting to adjust your intensity accordingly. Make it so that you're having fun. That way the rowing machine isn't too boring.